Back in the saddle, Ryan Talbot took a day off yesterday. How convenient, Ryan. I was talking to Brent Axe, who sat in for you yesterday, and I'm like, of all the days for Ryan to miss, the Diggs Palooza that was Tuesday was certainly an interesting time. But you're back. We have a lot to talk about today. Obviously, more Stefon Diggs. We're also going to talk about, a Bills minicamp practice that was indoors, so not as fruitful, if you will, as one would be outdoors, where we can kind of move around a little bit more, see a little bit more of the action, but plenty of things to get into. How are you, Ryan?
I am doing great, Matt. I'm excited to be back after, I wouldn't call it a day off necessarily, chaperoning my son's field trip. It was something else, but excited to talk some Bills football. And in case, the Bills Mafia forgot, Sean McDermott was a college defensive back, and that man can still backpedal based on what we saw today.
Oh, Ryan, you have a future as a comedian once you hang up the Bills coverage shoes. All right, so let's get into this first and foremost. We're going to start with Diggs once again today. A little bit more information coming out today. First of all, he was at practice today. So that I think was something when that came out, the big reaction to that I saw mostly from Bills fans was a sigh of relief. It was the same old Diggs out on the practice field, smiling, joking, handshakes with Josh Allen, catching some passes from Josh Allen during individual work. He did not work in the team portion of practice. Not a surprise. Sean McDermott said they're ramping him back up. He's arrived in great shape. But once practice ended, it was interesting because Mitch Morse came out for his interview. He answered two questions, and then Sean McDermott kind of took over the press conference, if you will. Actually didn't. Morse saw him coming, said, okay, got to go. He walked off to the side. McDermott sat down, and he wanted to provide some more clarity to the situation. And I think really what got this thing going yesterday, if you go back and look at it, was Sean's comments about Diggs not being there, not providing any detail of the fact that he was there earlier and had reported on Monday. It was presented as if Diggs was not at minicamp. And then he followed up, a question was asked about, are you concerned about him not being here? And he said, yeah, very concerned. He clarified things today and thought that was important. He said he saw things out on the internet that were inaccurate and that weren't fair. So he wanted to add some clarity. And it's amazing how much clarity can be added when you actually say what's happening, which, by the way, and we'll get to this in a second, we still don't really know what's happening. Like that's, I just put out the story on this, and it's still this mysterious beef that Stefon Diggs has with the Bills or with somebody, whatever the case may be. He reported on Monday, took a physical, went home, reported Tuesday, and Sean McDermott said the two sides had a lot of conversations, healthy conversations, but it reached a point where both sides wanted some space. So Sean McDermott excused Stefon Diggs from practice, sent him home, went out and conducted practice, and then conversations reignited after practice. However the setting was there, he didn't get into those parts of the details. And they've moved to a place where both sides feel like they're now in a good spot. He practiced today. He was asked directly if the situation was resolved, and he said that it was. And now it seems like, all systems go moving forward, looking at training camp, but there's still a lot to unpack here, Ron. I mean, this is something that I still feel like could loom over things. I mean, whenever things start to go bad, and as we move along here, how much do we learn about what he's actually upset about?
Yeah, we probably don't because, another Sean McDermott answer is we want to keep things in-house. We don't want to we want to respect the conversations that are ongoing or that we've had. And I get that and I understand that. But everything that happened yesterday in terms of the media reaction nationally, locally, that's 100% on Sean McDermott because you said it. He came out and he said he's not here. And then he said he was, very concerned. And he tried to clarify that today, saying, hey, I've been here for years. I always say I'm very concerned. And he has, to his credit. But all he had to say was Stefon Diggs showed up. He took his physical and we excused him from today's practice. If he says that, there's no tweeting up a storm from the media. There's no stories that come out on every site you can think of, including many on nyf.com and syracuse.com. It's just, he put himself into that corner. I think that's why he said, you know what? I need to meet with the media again today. I need to kind of come up and say, I should have handled this a little bit better. Maybe it was frustration on his end in terms of the way he kept things short yesterday. There's certain details he doesn't have to provide in terms of what led to these conversations, what led to these issues. But he needs to communicate in a much clearer sense in terms of, yes, he was here, that being Diggs showing up for the physical, showing up for the meetings and everything else, instead of just saying he's not here and we're very concerned.
Yeah, and I think, piecing this all together, what we do know is Diggs wasn't happy at the end of last season. He said as much in the Super Bowl media tour that he went on. Josh Allen said yesterday that it comes down to organizational communication, and maybe that wasn't done in the right way. And, I think it goes back to, I do think that Brandon Beane's usual model of letting guys get away from it, and I mentioned this on the show yesterday, is a good tactic. Let everybody reset, get the training right, come back, have those conversations. But it feels like this kind of was left to brew a little bit too long. And then when he shows up for minicamp, it came to a head. It apparently. And, one of the things that I wanted to pull out, and it's included in the story that you can go read over at New York Upstate or in Syracuse.com right now, was, Josh Allen said yesterday that, being in the same room together and talking things through was helpful. Things that maybe, going back to last season when looking at, Diggs's unhappiness, whether it be on the sideline, whether it be with the way the offense changed, he said it. And this is something else that Allen said. He said, I know everybody in our locker room loves Diggs, and I don't think we're going to see this as anything different other than a guy that wants to win and somebody that we need to incorporate a little bit better in what we're doing here. And I got no doubt that we will. And then Sean McDermott was asked kind of about that today. And he said, getting Diggs the ball is an important part of the offense. There's no reason to say it isn't. I mean, he's a big focal point of our offense in addition to Josh. It's important to get him going, and the more production he has, the more production we have as an offense. Those usually work hand in hand. I've said it before. He provides great energy, blah, blah, blah. The point being, Ryan, I think that this iteration of this team has now been basically in place for 3 years, and they've regressed. What I get a sense of is Stefon Diggs is just not happy with the regression, it seems, going from the AFC title game to the divisional loss to the Chiefs, and then the way that they lost at home to the Bengals. It's like, okay, what are we doing and what are we going to change? And maybe those conversations, some real truths about, what has transpired, got things to the point that they were at yesterday. But it seems like they're moving in a healthier direction, which I guess is good.
Yeah, I think the way the last few seasons have ended have probably weighed on Diggs, but also his usage. And if you split up last year into thirds or into quarters, you could see in the beginning of the year how involved he was, the big outings that he had. He was near or at the top of the league in receiving after a few weeks into the year. And then the tail stretch of the season, the targets weren't they weren't there as much, the receiving yards, the touchdowns, you name it. It's just he was almost taken out of this offense a little bit. And part of that is game planning by opposing coordinators. But part of that is the Bills also have to counter that and say, okay, if they're going to play him this way, we need to move him to the slot. We need to get him the ball in his hands quickly. If they're going to double him or if they're going to do certain things downfield, they have to counter punch when teams try to specifically take Diggs out of the game plan. And another thing they can do is add more weapons. And, they've done that. They did that with Dalton Kincaid. They did that with Deontay Hardy, Trent Sherfield. And yes, these are, some of those are not household names or household names yet, but the Bills are kind of, in terms of their financial restraints with the salary cap. I thought they went out and they added some nice pieces to this offense, but it should still be the Stefon Diggs show at the end of the day. When the Bills need to make a big play, when they need to put up points, he needs to be the focal point of this offense, and they need to come up with ways to utilize him, especially down the stretch, a lot better than they have as of last year.
So let's pivot here real quick on the last thing I want to hit on Diggs here before we move into some of the other stuff. And as of now, there's another practice scheduled tomorrow. So guess what, guys? You're going to get us again tomorrow. So get ready for that. Big picture, looking ahead. One of the things I kind of saw it percolating on social media and some of the national shows talking through this, I saw a clip from Ryan Clark about how when teams become good and, start to be together for a long time, some of those like internal communication deals like can blow up into bigger things. And, hearing it talked about locally, like, the Bills are now one of those teams that, everything that happens is news because Josh Allen's on the cover of Madden. He's one of the elite quarterbacks in the NFL. Stefon Diggs is this superstar model in the offseason, all these kinds of things. How big of a problem is this moving forward? Do you think this is something that because Sean McDermott's in place, they have the culture that they have this roster that's been built that's, Super Bowl contender ready, they can move past this and this won't become a problem? Or do you feel like because of the situation on offense and now a new wide receivers coach, still a young offensive coordinator, Josh Allen, with all these extra eyes, like this has the potential to be something that continues to be a problem throughout the season?
I think it's the latter, especially if things hit a rough patch in the year. And I think that's when all eyes will be on this team. Will be on the leadership. Will be on the culture. Will be on Stefon Diggs and how he reacts. Listen, he's a competitor. He's a fiery competitor. He gets upset. But how does he handle this? And if the Bills do hit a rough patch, especially in a very tough AFC East this year with the Dolphins and the Jets just, right there roster-wise, right there in terms of being legitimate contenders to the AFC East crown, problems could percolate or arise again. So it's not something where I say it's resolved, it's over and done with. We've seen, Bills players get animated on the sidelines. We've seen Sean McDermott have to calm down Stefon Diggs in game before. We've seen him, how he reacted late last season to, I'm assuming, not getting the ball and not having his number called as it should have been. So I can't just sit here and say everything's hunky-dory now and everything's fine. Just because we've seen it enough where no matter how good this culture is, no matter how good this team is, if they hit a rough patch, I could see some frustration, rising to the surface.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of rising to the surface, I'd like everybody to rise to the surface here and hit that like button, subscribe to our channel as well as we get into all things Buffalo Bills minicamp for the rest of the show. Get out your calendars as well, because on June 23rd, Ryan, we are back at Wingnuts. I mean, 10 days away. I cannot wait. The wings are going to be flowing. The beers are going to be flowing, and we're going to be talking a lot about the Bills and kind of all these topics as well. A lot of things happening in our world, and we want to share it with you. I feel like in the setting out at Wingnuts, it's much more intimate. You get a chance to kind of meet up with us, talk to us about, there's some things changing with our coverage here in the next couple of months that are really exciting. You want the inside scoop? Come out to Wingnuts. It's going to be a fun night.
Yeah, you can't beat a night out at Wingnuts. Like you said, we interact with everyone that's there for the show before and after. Obviously, we host a live podcast there for anyone that can't make it. But come on out. Great food, great wings, great beers. And again, when I say great food, it's not just wings there on the menu. I know that's the main menu item, but they have outstanding sandwiches, their pizza, you name it. So you can't go wrong joining us at Wingnuts. And if you don't believe us, if you check Wingnuts and the social channels, Bills players have been coming there quite a bit the past few months, and I think they're understanding just how good the food is there as well.
Yes, sir. Let's get into this practice a little bit, Ryan. It was, I got to be honest, I kind of, it's a bummer when we go inside because we're kind of stuck on that one end zone, can't walk on the sides. And today I felt like a lot of the work was done at the complete other end. So like you're kind of trying to watch the, look at the forest through the trees, and it can be a really challenge at times. But there was a couple of really important pieces that I wanted to pluck out. Let's talk 716 Sports ask, how did Josh Allen look today? I thought he looked good. I mean, I thought he was sharp. One of the highlight plays of the day, 2 touchdown passes from Josh Allen. One came to Gabe Davis, who, let me get out my dandy notebook to make sure that we have all this on the record. Christian Benford was in coverage. I can't get too much into the look and what was happening on the play, but he kind of just lost track of him a little bit. I don't know how much of it was his responsibility. You saw Cam Lewis kind of flying into the play as well to try to help out. But it was a great route run by Gabe Davis. He showed Josh Allen an opening, and it was probably about a 20 to 30-yard touchdown pass. And it was one of those first big explosive plays of the day. And like the offense was kind of hooting and hollering. They were excited. Davis makes the good touchdown grab. He turns around, and it was right in the far corner, right by the basketball hoop that they have set up in there. So, of course, that was part of Davis's celebration. He turned, kind of took a three-pointer. I didn't see if he sank it. But that's a good thing to see. I mean, obviously, Diggs not participating in team drills today, but I feel like Gabriel Davis has been that consistent player. Bill Barnwell from ESPN tweeted out, what it would look like to trade Stefon Diggs in the middle of all of this chaos. And obviously, that's not happening. The Bills are not trading Stefon Diggs. It's not something that I think, to everything that everybody's been talking about the last couple of days, Allen, Von Miller, Sean McDermott, they value what he is in this offense. And I don't think this is just like replaceable or replicable, what he does in this offense. It's why a lot of people are like, I hear this on local radio talk shows all the time. The Bills should have never traded for Stefon Diggs. They should have just sat at that pick and picked Justin Jefferson. Like, that was just this simple equation that was sitting out there for them to just execute. Diggs has meant so much more to this thing than his role right now in 2023. It's been about the building arc of Josh Allen and what he's meant to that as well. But I feel like with him out of the picture the last couple of weeks, Gabriel Davis has been that one constant. And I think today was an example of him, stepping into a leadership role in his own right, heading into a contract year. I just get the gut feeling that we're in for the conversation to change a little bit on Gabriel Davis over the next couple of months.
Well, I think it's going to come down to one word you used early on, and that's consistency. If he is consistent for this offense, he catches the ball, he kind of eliminates some of those drops that he has issues with, then, yeah, the conversation might change into, man, the Bills do need to find a way to extend him, keep him in-house as that wide receiver 2 long-term, because right now there are still questions. Is this guy a true number 2 receiver? Is he more of a number 3 kind of being played as number 2 receiver? In a contract year, Davis is going to answer that question. And if he answers it with, yes, he's a number 2 receiver, the Bills or another team are going to pay him a good chunk of money for the foreseeable future. And if he struggles, then, well, maybe it's the Bills getting him at a discounted rate, or he goes elsewhere. We saw the wide receiver market wasn't necessarily booming in free agency, but Davis has to just be more consistent. We've seen the spectacular sideline toe taps. We've seen him get downfield and make those big plays, but we've also seen those frustrating drops on catches he should be making, 99 out of 100 times, and that's not the case. And he's still struggling in that area. So huge year on the horizon for him. Obviously, I do think the ankle injury played a small part in his struggles last year, but it doesn't always play, I don't think it played a role in terms of the drop. So clean that up, and we could be talking, like you said, the conversation could shift on Gabe Davis significantly.
The other big play was Trent Sherfield, touchdown city from Josh Allen. And it was a great route run. He caught separation, beat Dane Jackson. It was tough to see the number. Could have been Dane Jackson, could have been Christian Benford. They kind of like flipped around on the play. So I couldn't really it was a little bit chaotic scene. It was literally the other end of the field house. Whoever it was up against, Trent Sherfield with a great touchdown, and one where he had to, he showed a little nuance in the route running to me in that play, because he had to kind of make a move halfway through the route, get some separation, and then make the catch on the other end. And the celebration, sometimes you can feel the vibe from the celebration, like how big of a play it was, the reaction from the players, some of his teammates, his actual reaction. And it was just like, it was elevated quite a bit. So Trent Sherfield, again, with Stefon Diggs out of the mix, Josh Allen mentioned it a couple weeks ago. That's given him an opportunity to get really comfortable with things. That could only be a good thing moving forward.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. And Trent Sherfield, we've mentioned this before. Everywhere he's gone in his career, he's performed well in terms of like the practice setting, and opportunities have been hard to come by, though, because of where he was, where he was added as an undrafted free agent compared to other guys being drafted in Arizona. He was with San Francisco. He was with Miami. Buffalo is a place that if you shine, if you're someone that performs well, here at mandatory camp, if you perform well throughout the summer at training camp, you're going to get those opportunities on the field. They're not going to keep you on the bench because they drafted a guy last year. They have Gabe Davis and Stefon Diggs. And obviously those guys are going to get the lion's share of the reps, but they're going to find ways to work you in, whether it's in the slot, whether it's spelling one of those guys on the outside at times. You're going to get your number called upon. They don't just, go with the guys who are brought in on a bigger contract. So Sherfield has every opportunity to show that he belongs on the field and then get those fair amount of reps and in-game settings here in 2023.
On the defensive side of things, let's talk about that. I got another offensive player that we're going to talk about a little bit, and I talked about him yesterday, so a lot of this player the last couple of days, but he's making plays, and it's worth talking about and get your take on it. Defensively, somebody that's kind of way down the depth chart. I mean, undrafted guy last year, Jamarcus Ingram, he's been making some noise this minicamp. I mean, Von Miller started off the hype train a little bit a couple weeks ago when he mentioned him when asked about who stood out to him. He's just continued to make plays. And today he had an interception, picked off Kyle Allen on what wasn't even a bad throw. It was just a better play by the defender. And then a couple plays later, almost has another interception, ends up being just a pass breakup. A huge practice for Jamarcus Ingram. I did not see Cam Dantzler out there today after seeing him out on Tuesday. I don't know what's going on there. We'll take a look for him tomorrow. But guys like Jamarcus Ingram, I feel like make it so tough on some of those like vet guys that, early on in the Bean era where, you think back to the Kevin Johnsons of the world, the Philip Gaines of the world, or not Philip Gaines, who was the one, what was the corners that the vet corners they brought in early? There was EJ Gaines. Was that it?
EJ Gaines was here. Yep. I think he had 2 stints with the team technically. Obviously Josh Norman, you mentioned Kevin Johnson. So yeah, they always had those vet options.
And I feel like guys like Ingram who've had that download over the course of the year as part of a practice squad. He got some EJ Gaines. That's it. He knows the system. He's much more comfortable going into year 2. He's got size. He's got quickness. He's flashing it out there. This is not a setup for a defensive player to make plays. Like you can't really touch these guys. There's no threat of hitting guys over the middle. And so I think when guys make plays in this setting, it really stands out. And, Ingram's having himself a really good spring.
Yeah. And I think with Ingram, confidence is key. I remember when Von Miller, specifically said, hey, he had a really good practice, and Ingram was like, no, I didn't. He's one of those players that he's probably striving to play with perfection, which you just can't do it. Like you said, in these kind of practices, it leans in the favor of the offense. Probably just a case of him being too hard on himself. But if he keeps building on these practices and building, his confidence is going to be at a high level going into training camp where, it's more of a fair balance there. And like you said, at the bottom of this roster, they're not going to keep a veteran for the sake of keeping a veteran. If they think Ingram is one of their best 6 or maybe 7 cornerbacks, I think 6 is that good number there for that position though. They'll have him on this roster. They're not going to play favorites of the Dantzlers of the world or anyone else that they have brought in or bring in. It's going to be a fair opportunity. So I hope Ingram continues to build upon his strong start here to the summer.
Another defensive player that I want to mention. I mean, I feel like I sound like a broken record at this point, but man, does Christian Benford just compete his butt off every practice. It doesn't matter the setting. It doesn't matter the reps that he's getting, what team he's on, any of that kind of stuff. When you see him out on the field, no matter who he's going up against, the dude is just like, he's ultra competitive and fiery, like in that practice setting. And I think that's why coaches gravitate so much to him, and he's going to get plenty of opportunities to stay in the fight for that CB2 job. I mean, he's really up against it if you think about it, Ryan. Like Dane Jackson he's the new Levi Wallace who, stiff-armed every piece of competition the Bills brought in for him for years before ultimately he, just ran out of time on his contract. Dane Jackson's in that role now, and they obviously have Kyer Elam, who they spent a high draft pick on, and we could talk about something about him maybe later. Maybe we'll save this for next week. Remind me on that. I got a Kyrie Elam little side topic that I want to have. But Benford makes another play today, one-on-one with Trent Sherfield early in practice. I felt like kind of set the tone. Josh Allen was pretty dialed in today. I thought he made a lot of good throws, but on this one, he tried to kind of rifle one into Sherfield, and there was Christian Benford, stride for stride, blow for blow, breaks up the pass, and just another big time play. Sword Brother Joseph on YouTube says Elam has been extremely disappointing. Listen, I think also with that, you don't want to overhype these mini camp accomplishments, right? Like, however the competition is kind of factoring out right now, this thing's going to look much differently in 2 months. So I don't want to overdo it. I want to have a separate conversation about Elam. This doesn't have anything to do with it, but man, Benford continues to make plays.
The Bills do have a good knack for finding quality players from these smaller schools, and Benford came in a very zone dependent scheme that he played in college, and he impressed as a rookie, and it's good to see that it wasn't something where it was just kind of a system fit, and that he's continuing to make these gains and these strides as a player, because he showed last year, especially early on in the year. I thought that he looked like he truly belonged out there on the field as a cornerback 2 type of option for this team. So Benford, like you said, he's in the mix for this job, but they do love Dane Jackson. And when you spend a first round pick on a Kyrie Elam, and Elam, when he was out there on the field, flashed last year, the interception against KC, I thought he had a really good playoff game against Miami. And that's not just the only, cases of it. I thought every time he had opportunities, he played well. But Benford's a legitimate competitor, and he's proven time and time again, you can't count him out.
I wanted to bring up, I asked Mitch Morse today. Again, we're not really, diving too deep into how did the offensive line look in team drills. Like it's hard unless they're, somebody like completely stand somebody up or really outwork somebody on a rep. You're not going to hear me talk about it too much, but I thought it was interesting. I asked Mitch Morse today about O'Cyrus Torrence. We're going into a couple weeks now where he's gotten an up close and personal look at what the new guard looks like. And he said, what stood out to him is like, first of all, he said, sometimes guys come in and guys get drafted in the early rounds, and one of the first things you're looking for is like, are they going to come in here acting like their shit don't stink? Do they need to be maybe brought down a couple notches? And he said that's not the case with Torrence at all. He's come in, he's been a sponge, and he said one of the things that it's been is like a deep dive into learning the techniques that Aaron Kromer teaches, and that's why, as we're projecting this offensive line out past this, spring and into the summer, I do think Torrence has a little bit of an uphill battle to win that one of those guard spots to start the season, only because I remember something that Roger Saffold said to me at the end of last season. It's like, you'll be amazed at how much guys that were here this year, first year under Kromer, take a significant jump just in their comfort level, knowing what the expectation is of how he wants them to execute their techniques within the scheme. And so now you take Torrence, who's coming in here, and this is all foreign to him. I mean, he's coming into a line where usually athleticism is prioritized, and they're going to ask him, who's a little bit more of an anchor type guy, to be a little bit more athletic and execute some of those things. And I think that's going to be really interesting to see how he deals with that over the course of the first few weeks of training camp, and the ups and downs that he has, and where he's lining up and all those kinds of things. Not that we can report on that.
Right. And the technique part is huge, because Kromer's techniques are specific to the player and the player's size. And Torrence is going to be, going through the learning process there. He's going to be thrown into the fire, so to speak, in terms of on the practice field here at training camp coming up. And yes, he's a mauler. He's a big guy. He has a great pedigree, best pure guard in the draft based on what a lot of analysts believe. But that doesn't mean that he'll be a week 1 starter. Certainly possible. Wouldn't shock me. I think he's still going to end up starting a lot of games this year. But the Bills also invested a lot in the interior of their line, and they still have Ryan Bates. And, McGovern was signed to a decent deal, and Edwards, former protege or player under Kromer, is here, and Ike Butker's back, and the list goes on and on. So it's a legitimate competition with a lot of starter worthy candidates.
Indeed. I got a couple more things that I want to hit on here before we get out, but 300 watching on YouTube, big time. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel as well. Gary V says he'll be back at Wingnuts in July. That's
Love
what I'm
it.
talking about, Gary. Let's go. Here's the thing, though. July is going to be interesting. Like, we're going to try to put together that schedule here in the next couple of weeks, plan out the next couple of months. We will have some on-location events in Rochester during training camp. So stay tuned for that. I'm really excited about the potential there. Okay, a couple more things I wanted to mention. You know who's been having himself a really nice spring?
Who's that?
Keyshawn Johnson.
Yeah.
Keesean Johnson made a couple plays today, and it doesn't matter who he's lining up against. He's a guy he's super feisty. I think if I was power ranking some of these guys, I'd have Keyshawn Johnson past the big five, right? I'd have him close to the top. I think Desmond Patman has also done a really nice job. Jalen Wayne made a really good catch yesterday, but it wasn't, he didn't keep his feet in bounds, but you could see a little bit of the, the DNA, from Uncle Reggie there. Or is that his uncle or his brother? I can't remember. Or his,
Uncle.
His uncle. It is his uncle. I think all of the kind of lower end wide receivers have had a really nice spring. I think this could be a really competitive situation for guys like Alex Austin, Jamarcus Ingram, Christian Benford, whoever is on those, on the second, third, fourth team, however you want to kind of figure that all out in training camp. There's going to be some really fun battles to watch if you go out to a training camp practice.
Yeah, and I don't think the Bills would do this, but a guy like Keyshawn Johnson, he's someone that maybe they feel like they could sneak onto the practice squad, and I'm sure same thing with Wayne. There are certain guys that I'm sure they will add, but you're right. The bottom of these position battles are going to be interesting because there's always one or two surprise guys that make that 53-man roster. Wouldn't shock me if it was at cornerback or at wide receiver. This O-line is very deep on the interior, like we were just mentioning. Linebacker could have some surprises because of the mix of vets and younger players. So I'm really excited about camp, seeing these guys battle things out, fight out, to see who, one, will make the initial 53-man roster, and two, maybe who will surprise us and have a bigger role than we anticipated here right now in early or mid-June.
Last point here, and I want to make sure that I have it. Khalil Shakir, Ryan. The dude just continues to make plays. His hands, they're so reliable. Like, and I, again, things change when you get the pads on and all that kind of stuff. But, he is going to make it, I think, really challenging to utilize all the guys that they have. And of course, there could be injuries, all those kinds of things. But I don't know how this ends up working out in terms of the pecking order. Dawson Knox banged up yesterday. He suffered what looks like to be a left leg injury. He had it wrapped up today. I put out a video of him walking the facility. He was walking around okay. I think, I'm not a doctor. I don't specialize in limps or how that all looked, but he looked in good spirits. And I don't know if he'd have been out there if it was something more serious. But who knows? We'll see. But so he didn't practice today. Obviously, that meant more for Dalton Kincaid. He had, I think, one catch that I remember, not a ton. But if you take that slot situation, throw those tight ends into the mix with Hardy, Sherfield, Khalil Shakir, Kincaid, Knox. I mean, man, there's a lot of mouths to feed. That's a 5-headed monster outside of Diggs and Davis, who combined had almost 250 targets last season.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have, but it's going to be a problem nonetheless. Shakir, I love to see the work that he did this offseason. He got married in the offseason. Before that, he was working with Eric Moulds. After the wedding, and I'm sure after the honeymoon, he was working with Eric Moulds, former Bills great, putting in that extra work, working with a guy that had a great career in Buffalo. Would love to hear more about their relationship and how that kind of came to be, something maybe we'll dig into here in the summer at training camp. But Shakir, the year 1 to year 2 leap, I really do believe is something that's true for these players. They come in, a lot of them are in these college bowl games, and they're going through the top 30 visits, the private workouts. They don't have a true off season to work on specifics in terms of what the team's looking for. After the rookie seasons, the team will give them almost like a checklist, like here's what we need you to work on. And he's had the entire offseason to really zero in on those specific things that the Bills said, this is what you need to get better at. This is where we want you to be. And again, a player where last year when the Bills drafted him, a lot of draft analysts thought it was a real steal for the team. In that Miami playoff game, he would have gone over 100 yards receiving had he not dropped that deep pass right before halftime, I believe it was. So he was someone that was kind of coming on late in the year. Interested to see if he picks up where he left off.
We will pick up where we left off tomorrow, Ryan Talbot. Thank you so much for watching. Continue to support the show. Hit that like and subscribe button before you get out of here, June 23rd at Wingnuts. Don't forget it. I'm going to do a mini camp wrap observation story tomorrow. It's looking like we're going to get another practice. So I'm going to put, some things that I haven't even touched on yet from yesterday. I'm going to put it all in one story. We'll touch on a couple more things tomorrow. Hopefully we can get back outside and bring you one last observations episode before we have the long break before training camp. It's going to be here before you know it, Ryan.
Yeah, you're right. You're going to be living that dorm life here before you know it, Matt Parrino.
Got to get you into the dorm one night. Like, come on, man. Yeah. Like, we got to get you over in the dorms for a night or two. It's the summer. People are going to want to see, they're going to want to see some Ryan Talbot out in Pittsburgh. So we're going to have to plan this out. Are you teaching summer school this summer?
I am.
Talbot, one of these summers,
I'll have to
got to give the people what they want.
I know.
More Talbot in Pittsburgh.
You're not wrong. A lot more trips to the dairy farm and some shakes. I need it too. So one of these years in the near future.
All right. He's Ryan. I'm